Thank you. Hello. Thanks to Ellie and the Rabbit Room for creating this space. And thank you for joining us here with your lunch or your coffee, as it were. Okay, so I'm just going to just put this out there. Online lectures, Zoom, isn't quite the same as being in person, but it's still really kind of cool that we get to be gathered here. And thank you to those who sent out your responses to my email. We're coming from Kansas, Louisiana, Ohio, Virginia, Minnesota, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Missouri, Alabama, Idaho, Arkansas, Washington, and Western Canada. Did I miss anybody? If anybody's got a state, you're welcome to just go ahead and shout it out. I'd welcome it. And I don't know if anybody can top Western Canada. I don't know. Two thumbs up.
I was late. I said Missouri. I'm from St. Louis. Sorry, I just emailed my stuff in.
Welcome, Anna from Missouri. I'm delighted. Anyone else?
Sydney, Australia.
I'm sorry. Did you say Australia?
Yes.
Oh, and Texas. Oh, that's amazing. Okay. That might have it, guys. Unless someone can top Australia, we're going to give the two thumbs up to you. Thank you for joining. Wow. Okay. So during our time together, I am going to sometimes ask you questions. When that happens, please answer. We've all been on those calls where there's kind of like this cone of silence, and it is uncomfortable for everyone. And there's only so much like Bueller that I can handle. So when you hear a question, it's not rhetorical, it's not a strategy. I really am looking for your engagement, and it is not shy or rude or awkward to leap right in. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start us off by just talking about loneliness, sad trombone. Wah, wah. There are a lot of long words in this title. Questions, creativity, loneliness, hospitality, conversation. I'm pretty passionate about these topics. They tie in with the themes that I've been commissioned by Rabbit Room to write about this year. And obviously we won't be able to exhaust all of them in our time together today, but hopefully we'll kind of be able to connect and think about them deeply enough so that there's some helpful takeaways in our day-to-day lives. Okay, Ellie's gonna share her screen. Ew. Yes, 1 second. But that can everyone see the screen that Ellie has shared? Give a thumbs up if you can. Yes, nice. All right. Because I'm technologically really bad at things, Ellie has agreed to be my slide person. So that's very kind of her. Okay, so in 2023, the Surgeon General released a 70-page advisory on loneliness as a public health crisis. This is in the wake of COVID. I think it was on everybody's minds. It still is in large part on everyone's minds. So humans were made for relationship. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert. It doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or what your temperament is. We're built for relationship. Biologically, we need them. Theologically, we need relationships. We are created in the image of God, who exists within the context of relationship. From before time existed until eternity passed into the future, God exists and exists in relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we know all this, but when we come face to face with the reality of loneliness, it really does cause you to think about it in more personal terms. It goes from kind of being a concept you can think about rationally to, it's painful. It's a terrible, painful feeling. So my husband and I and my daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter, we have moved a lot. And I have a map here that Ellie's going to pull up for you. We moved from Alabama to Utah to Connecticut to Maryland to Tennessee, where we currently live and where we call home. And each time we've moved, it's roughly a 2 to 3 year stay max. My husband and I are both in medicine, and I'm sure many of you have moved. I know there's some military people out there. And when you're looking to stay in a place for 2 to 3 years, if you wait for people to reach out to you and invite you in, you might never establish community at all. So it was kind of a crash course in ripping up roots and plunking them down and having to learn how to do that quite quickly. And so it taught a lot about relationship building, about the purpose of the church, and about my role in offering hospitality. But it wasn't until we landed in Connecticut for my husband's infectious disease fellowship that loneliness really became very personal. New England is not known for its warmth. I'm sorry if you lived in, I do love New England. We had a great time there in Connecticut. But I'm going to tell a story to illustrate that loneliness is not a problem to which Christians are immune. So we landed in New Haven, Connecticut. My husband was swept away into a 90-plus-hour week fellowship. We knew it was going to be hard. We didn't know it was going to be this hard. And so I've got a 3-year-old kid at this point. And I think to myself, the church, I need the church. I need a local body to support me and to know and be known. And I've written about this a little bit, but we went to a newcomers brunch on a particular Sunday, and we're all sharing our names and going around the circle. And it gets to me, and I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Kate Gaston. And at that point, the tears just like overwhelmed me, and I'm so lonely, and I'm alone, and I need friends. I don't even know what I said because I was just in that kind of like emotional, whatever, kind of a crisis. And I distinctly remember I got a pat on the shoulder and then nothing. There was no follow-up, no coffee date, no, hey, you burst into tears in this event. Let's have a chat. I think that was my first realization that sometimes the expectations that we have of the church can not be met. That you can actually feel lonelier in church than any other place, perhaps because of this expectation that you'll be kind of engulfed in this warm, welcoming community. So it was a real boots on the ground reality check that the church is made up of sinners, and we are going to let each other down. However, we have to hold it in this tension. The church is the body of Christ, and it is made up of a bunch of sinners, while simultaneously we are the hands and feet of Christ and are often his best plan for each other, which is why it is vitally important to engage with these themes. So I've got a quote here from C.S. Lewis from The Four Loves. Friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things which gives value to survival. Thanks, C.S. Lewis. You've done it again. All right, so barriers to relationship. I'm going to talk kind of briefly about the iron cage of modernity, where we find ourselves in our particular time and place. So we are products of the Industrial Revolution. We are products of the technological age. And because we exist in this time and this place, there are habits and barriers that keep us, that are very specific to our time, that keep us kind of blocked off from each other. So we all know this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. But phones, everybody's got a computer, a screen in their pocket, probably at this moment. We're all looking at a separate one right now. I personally have 3 separate screens within arm's reach, which is kind of wild. And so we reach for them at any time. You've had a hard day, you zone out and you binge. Have you had a good day? You post about it. So we're kind of comforted and lulled and wooed by these devices. And we often grab for them without thinking. Like literally on the way here, I was stopped at a stoplight. And rather than just like thinking about what I'm going to say or even praying or what have you, I grab my phone. We're talking, I probably have less than 30 seconds. And there I am just reaching out of habit. We grab them when we're sad, happy, alone, or in a crowd. We use them as shields. When we don't want to talk to people, or when we don't want them to talk to us, we use them as security blankets. Our cars and our houses, our backyards with our 12-foot privacy fences, our routines. We worked late. The kids have soccer practice. It's a school night. It's a weekend. We're too tired. We're too stressed. Um, it could also be a presupposition about the normal ways that relationships work. Um, that was certainly true for me. We moved to a new place the first time we did it, and we expected the neighbors to bring us cookies, or we step into a new church and we expect the existing members should notice us and then they should invite us to dinner or out to coffee. And maybe that happens. Maybe your story is that that's the way it happened. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to share a painting with you. I'm sure you've seen it before. It's a painting by a man named Edward Hopper. He painted it in 1942, and it's called Nighthawks. This painting is often interpreted as kind of a symbol of urban isolation. It represents loneliness. It represents the alienation of modern life. And his particular context was kind of in the tumult and the anxiety of World War II. Um, I chose this painting to illustrate the sense of isolation and loneliness that tends to characterize our lived experience. We are all together. There are people around us almost all the time, but we are each in our separate sphere of existence. So, looking at this painting and considering the contextual differences between when Hopper painted it and how the social mores have changed to reflect 2025, it makes me wonder if Hopper had painted this painting today, would the characters in the paintings have had phones in their hands or earbuds in? As it is, they are sitting in this lonely restaurant, maybe conversing, maybe not. So we would still be humans sitting alone. But with our technologies, we are given this illusion that we are not alone. And the illusion makes it easier to justify the isolation. It makes it much more difficult to make those connections, and I'll talk about this later, which link us together and which might actually be life-giving to each other. I'm going to move on to kind of the next theme, which is the inefficiency of relationships. I've written a little bit about my neighbor, Joe. He's like 150. He is housebound. He's on a walker. And I didn't know about Joe until I was sitting on my front porch one day, just enjoying a cup of coffee, reading a book. We just moved in like a week before, so I was really just like bonding with my new home. And then I hear the next door, like the house next door, like the knob starts to jiggle. And it takes like a while for it to like jiggle, and they finally it comes out. And he's on his walker, and Joe is, he can't hear, but that doesn't stop him from trying to engage in conversation. And it is the most inefficient communication imaginable. And also, he loves vice presidential history. I learned more about vice presidential history than I have ever thought of or cared to think of in my life. And getting to know Joe, and then like I think the icing on the cake, that first conversation, he couldn't hear me, so I kept screaming at him, and then moving closer and closer to him until I was kind of like right underneath him, and we were screaming back and forth. And then he was like, "Hey, I'll take a Whopper from Burger King. That'd be great, and some fries, and I can't remember, was it a Diet Coke or sweet tea, something?" But it was just like, oh, you want me to go now? You want me to drop what I'm doing and go to Burger King this moment? And yeah, sometimes loving people is highly inefficient, and it can be annoying. It can, I'm sure you have your own version of Joe or that person. When you see them coming towards you, like your heart sinks because you know that it's going to be a long conversation and there's literally no way out of it except through it. And we are all born of a culture. We live in a culture that prioritizes efficiency over connection. Don't slow me down. Don't get in my way. Like what somebody said about like the having the space to have a conversation and the margin and the time. It really does requiring you to like shut down all the other tabs that you have open at any given time and just being completely present with that person. And sometimes yeah, it can be more painful sometimes than others. We have kind of an unquestioned belief that more efficiency is always better. Like we have an app for everything. And we love streamlining our lives. I found myself Like if I have to interact with a human at the grocery store or at a checkout line, it is like, oh no, okay. So it's like an active aversion. And I want to tell this story. This story actually, like this group of people that are here right now, you are the people that need to hear this story because no one else would. It's so weirdly specific to Rabbit Room. So I live in East Nashville. I have my local library. Outside the local library, of course, there's the little return book kiosk or whatever, so you can just dump your books. So you don't have to talk to a human. So this was like maybe February. So I just written my first article for Rabbit Room and it had come out. I was researching for my second one, reading these books, and I just had one book to return, and it was Madeline L'Engle's Walking on Water. So for whatever reason that day I decided, since it's just one, to return it at the front desk. And, here you go, librarian, like rework, reshelve my book. But since it's one, I felt fine. And so I'm checking out next to her and she picks up the book and she says, "Oh, did you like this book?" And I was like, what am I going to say? No, like, I don't like Madeline L'Engle's Walking on Water. You don't say that. It's like saying I don't like C.S. Lewis. But I was like, it was a great book. And she said, I read this one and then I read a different one that I really loved. Have you ever heard of this guy, Andrew Peterson? And he wrote this book called Adorning the Dark. And I was just like, there's no way this woman could know that I'm writing an article for the Rabbit Room community to read that was, given birth and space by this very man. There's just no way. Which is, side note, how I know that God is, like, he loves a good story. I kind of sometimes he's like just kind of watching up there, like, they found my Easter egg. I'm so excited. So anyway, my eyes get wide. I say, yes, I've read this book by Andrew Peterson. I ask her if she's been to Northwind Manor, since we both live in Nashville. Turns out she had never heard of Rabbit Room. She'd never heard of Northwind Manor. She'd never heard of any of the other stuff that is offered through this community. But she and her husband are musicians and have been feeling kind of the need for an artistic community that is also faith-based. And if there was ever a moment that made me realize the power of a human connection and how when we automate, we actually like cut away our chances to talk to a human, it was this moment that kind of made me a believer, just all the pieces working together. So yes, it will be inefficient. And yes, sometimes it will be uncomfortable, but we must talk to the humans. So it's through these kind of small, almost inconsequential acts of connection, which are, I mean, that is our chief means of being Christ's hands and feet in each other's lives. And so we can't, I don't know, I have a somewhat low anthropology. Like, I don't believe that I personally can save the world, but I know that I stand a shot at changing my neighbor's life. So hospitality and intentional relationship building, in my mind, are actually acts of kind of a countercultural resistance. And they kind of pry open those jaws of modernity that keep us lonely and keep us anxious and fearful, keep us in a spiral. And even if for a moment we can kind of spring the jaws of this trap loose and give relief to the souls within, including our own, then it is worth it. It's worth the inefficiency. It's worth the discomfort. My next theme is the title theme. It's questions as creativity. I'm going to briefly tell the story of Zeus. Zeus was a betta fish that we bought for my daughter's birthday. And he was all good. It was just living his fish life until one day I noticed him kind of bobbing up at the surface of his tank. And I would drop his food, the food would sink to the bottom, and Zeus would work really hard swimming down to the bottom of his tank, and then he'd stop swimming and he would buoy back up to the top. And he had swim bladder disease, but I use it as an example of like, that is what it feels like when you're in a conversation where you work so hard and you're asking all the questions and you're working, you're digging, and you're following it down, and then no matter what you do, it just seems to bob back up to this superficial place of lack of connection. Or you see the person the next time and it's like, we didn't even go there. which is really hard for me. I'm sure a lot of you can commiserate. So I read this great book. It's called Super Communicators. And a lot of these kind of really practical points of advice are, I mean, just straight up from this book. It is a great book if you're looking for a deeper dive into the subject of conversations. So quick takeaways though, we all know what it feels like to be asked or to ask one of those dead end questions like, what do you do? Where are you from? Where do you live? And these can be answered in one word sometimes. Actually, I just literally did this with Ellie. I said, where are you from? And she said, Charlotte. And I was like, cool. Now what? Is there anywhere to go from there? So to ask creative questions, it does require you to pause for a moment, and it requires you to kind of like holster that dead end question that you've been kind of asking all your life. And instead of where do you work, you would ask, what do you love about your work? Instead of where do you live, it's what's your favorite thing about where you live? Instead of where are you from, you could ask, what was it like to grow up in Charlotte? And so these are kind of emotional entry points into conversation, which are all good conversation in a lot of ways hinges on finding these emotional entry points. And so when you locate them, when you see some kind of like spark of passion, follow it. And these will lead you further up and further in. We are all passionate about something. Okay, so this is going to be really fun. So you guys gave me some fascinating answers to the questions that I posed in my email. And if you didn't get a chance to respond to the email, I'm sorry. Feel free to email me later. I would love to still hear your answers. But I posed, what are your unusual and interesting hobbies? And what on earth, you guys? Okay, so you make handmade greeting cards. You love films. You love reading. You quote unquote paint your breath. I don't even know what that means. It would be an amazing conversation to find out. You are scientists. You are writers. You love cooking. You love acting. You love playing piano. You take hip hop classes. You knit. You boulder. You play board games. You decorate cakes. You love swing dancing and silent retreats. You love painting and gardening and dreaming about painting and gardening. You play the banjo. You tame calves and ride horses. You curl. You quilt. And you teach people to love aviation. And that's just barely scratching the surface of how fascinating just this small group of people are. Humans will surprise you. So be willing to be surprised. And then when you find it, go in, go deeper. Be curious enough to keep digging and keep asking until you find that weirdly specific thing that person that makes that person that you're talking to kind of light up. Some practical steps for building connection. Okay, so you're new to a church, you're new to a school, you're new to any social group of any kind, and you find yourself gathered in a space with other humans. Do you talk? Do you get your phone out and look at it so you don't have to make eye contact? Do you ask the first question? Whose job is it? Is it the people that have been there longer? And I'm just going to straight up read this because when I moved from Connecticut and realized, oh, nobody's actually going to talk to me. Nobody's actually going to take the initiative. And, when you have that experience, I think this is one of the benefits of, I mean, if I can just be so bold to say there are benefits to suffering sometimes, there are benefits to loneliness in the context of this talk. It is to then be able to remember what it felt like, to be able to empathize with the humans that you see who are maybe sitting on the edges of the room, who aren't speaking to someone or look completely lost. So it really did kind of bring up this kind of burning passion to say, who's responsible to talk? And so I'm just going to read it. I wrote this for my January loneliness article. Whenever I encounter another human and I'm attempting to decide who is responsible for beginning the conversation, I ask myself this series of simple questions. Have I been in this room, building, or space before? Do I know more people in this room than the other person appears to know? If asked, could I direct someone to the bathroom? If asked, could I direct someone to the paper towels? If asked, could I direct someone to the coffee? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, the responsibility to begin the conversation with the other human is on me. If, however, the answers to any of these questions is no, I progress to a slightly more complicated rubric. It does get tricky here. I ask myself the following two questions. Did I put on my own pants this morning? Did I tie my own shoes today? If the answer to either of these questions is yes, the ability to begin the conversation is on me. So it was mostly just like there is no reason to let myself off the hook when I suspect that someone might be suffering from loneliness or who is not in solitude. I love that distinction that you guys drew out between isolation is different than solitude. And so like, yeah, someone who's experiencing solitude probably doesn't want me to talk to them. But if someone truly seems isolated or lonely, yeah, it's on me. And so letting go of that false assumption that someone else out there is going to come to me, or letting go also of that assumption, if you're the new person in a space, that I have to kind of wait to be approached. And I mean, there are so many different ways, so many different contexts that this could be entry points into a community, which is like signing up for the welcome team, bring the coffee and donuts to the meeting, hand out the bulletins, go up to someone and start a conversation. I don't know, make a joke. So many ways, but these are small entryways into kind of, they lead us to that ability to widen our circles. I firmly believe, and I stole this from my husband, thanks David, that we all have this kind of inner middle schooler who's kind of still alive within us, who is just waiting to be asked to dance to Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On. Like that person is in there and always will be. Okay, I'm gonna move on to my next theme, which is the power of collisions. You guys doing okay? Thumbs up? Okay, cool. Thank you again for being here. It's a delight to see your faces. So I mentioned this earlier. I especially it's kind of a hot moment right now politically, but so it's very hard to know what we can do. What can we do? There are moments in time in our culture which make you feel very small and very powerless. And that's okay. We serve a great God, and he has it. He has it. But what can we do? We can absolutely love our neighbor like we mean it. And so even though we are limited, even though we are creatures with finite energy and ability and reach, every single one of us can affect the person that we happen to find in our circle. And it doesn't actually have to look like inviting them to your house and serving a fancy meal. We offer hospitality like Jesus did, who didn't own a home, but wherever he went, he embodied welcome. He embodied hospitality. He saw people's needs. He offered his time, his attention, and his welcome. And it kind of didn't really matter where he was or who he was with. So who is in our circle? Who do you naturally collide with on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? And so I use this word collision, which I lifted from a great book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And effectively, it just means the people that you bump into at the grocery store, the YMCA, the coffee shop, the local librarian. These are the people that are in your circles. And I'm going to just steal another story. It's delightful to steal things from people, isn't it? But this book was introduced to me by Andy Patton, Rabbit Room's own. He told me about Culture Code, and then he told me this fascinating story when he and a group of friends lived in Chicago, so dense urban area. And if left to their own devices, they would probably never see each other. They would never run into each other because the city is huge. You could take your pick of which coffee shop or which, path you took to work. And in order to kind of like create a smaller condensed space, they chose to limit themselves to, this is our coffee shop. This is the route we walk to. This is our grocery store, etc. In order to increase their ability and chances of those collisions, which are the building blocks to relationship. Why do we care? Why would we do that? That feels extremely limiting. What's the point? And the point is that we can kind of leverage these normal, mundane, daily things that we all do as moments towards intentionally, again, being the hands and feet of Christ. It's that recognition that you have something to offer your neighbor, and that neighbor might actually have something to offer you. And it does require us to pay attention. Someone used that word, and I cannot stress it enough. It is so hard. It is so hard to pay attention to people like you actually care. It does require the plates to fall, to crash, that are all spinning. It requires those tabs to be closed. And it requires us to remember that the Holy Spirit is busy behind the scenes. We can't possibly know what he is up to. Sometimes he pulls back the curtain. Sometimes he lets us see, but not all the time. But when he does, it really makes for a great story. And I encourage you to write it down when it does happen, when you get to kind of see one of God's Easter eggs that he drops in your path. I've got this I've got a great slide that I would love to share. It's a quote from A. Milne, who wrote Winnie the Pooh. And I just feel like it kind of encapsulates so beautifully what we're trying to say. You can't stay in your corner of the forest waiting for others to come to you. You have to go to them sometimes. And so I would like us to now pivot. Okay, so I'm a writer. I like writing. And one of the patron saints of Rabbit Room, Flannery O'Connor, said, "I write because I don't know what I think until I read what I say." I don't know if you are also like that, if you have to write out the grocery list or write your to-do list or write what you're going to say before you meet that person. So I would love for us to embrace our inner writer. And I'm going to give 3 writing prompts. You're going to choose one, at least for this moment of our time together. You're welcome to take the other prompts with you into the week and kind of mull over them as you would like. So the first prompt is loneliness. Reflect on a time when you felt either deeply connected or profoundly lonely. What factors contributed to that experience? If you were given the chance, what actions or attitudes would you go back in time to change? And how does your past experience affect your future actions? The second prompt is conversations. Reflect on how you felt after a deep quality conversation. Contrast this experience with how you feel after a conversation in which you aren't knowing and being known. What are your strengths that you bring to conversation? What weaknesses? And the third prompt is questions as creativity. Why is it important to ask questions anyway? What are the barriers to asking questions? How do you know a good question when you hear one? And what are some habitual questions, good or bad, which you fall back on in conversation? So similar to the breakout room, you're welcome to go off camera. You're welcome to turn on some music, whatever does it for you, refill your coffee. We're going to take 10-ish minutes. So choose one prompt and we will meet back here in approximately 10 minutes. Happy writing, guys.